Nietzsche said that solitude is to the spirit what diet is to the body, and perhaps for that very reason, it's not for everyone. The German philosopher believed that only the strong, or rather those who dare to think deeply, can bear the weight and privilege of being alone. In a world that revolves around belonging and acceptance, choosing silence at the turn of the year is, in a way, an act of philosophical rebellion. Because while everyone decides to scream at the same time, while everyone performs the same programmed emotion, you're there, standing still, observing, and that bothers people because your quietness exposes the empty noise of others. Because the truth is that nobody teaches you how to deal with this kind of disconnect. Nobody prepares you for the moment when you realize that you're not on the same frequency as the rest of the world. And that maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe it's just a different way of being alive. The turn of the year alone isn't necessarily a failure. It's not necessarily a defeat. It could be the opposite of that. It could be the victory of someone who finally had the courage to stop pretending they were having fun, when in reality they were just following protocol. Nietzsche used to say that time isn't a ladder that takes you up. It's not a straight line that redeems you from who you were. It's a cycle that tests you, that confronts you, that asks you if you've really changed, or if you're just repeating the same gestures with different clothes. And when you're alone in that moment, when you don't have the distraction of the crowd, when you can't hide behind other people's noise, you're forced to face that question head on. You're forced to admit that maybe you're there, not because nobody wanted you, but because you finally understood that being among people who don't truly see you is much lonelier than being literally alone. Calendars carry with them a weight that we rarely question, because we're born into this system, because we grow up believing that certain dates mean certain things, that certain days demand certain emotions. The turn of the year is the peak of this symbolic prison. It's the moment when everyone collectively agrees that now, exactly now, we're going to feel hope. We're going to feel renewal. We're going to feel that the future will be better than the past. As if emotion could be programmed. As if there were a universal button that everyone presses at the same time and boom, everyone feels the same thing. Everyone vibrates on the same frequency. Everyone believes in the same comforting lie that this time it'll be different. But what happens when you don't feel that? When you look at the calendar and realize it has no power whatsoever over what's happening inside you? That the change of date doesn't change absolutely anything in your real life, in your real pain, in your real problems. You continue being the same person, with the same fears, with the same doubts, with the same emptiness, and no countdown is going to fill that. No toast is going to cure that. No promise made at midnight is going to transform that into something different. Society sells you the idea that you need to be happy on this day, you need to be accompanied on this day, you need to be full of plans and goals and promises for next year, as if life worked in these neat little blocks, as if you could simply press a button and restart everything from zero. But Nietzsche would remind you that time doesn't work like that. That time isn't this kind friend that gives you infinite chances. Time is this cruel mirror that shows you exactly who you are. And if you haven't changed internally, if you haven't done the real work of transformation, then the turn of the year is just theater where everyone pretends they're going to be different while continuing to be exactly the same. Social rituals don't exist to free you. They exist to control you, to tell you when to feel, how to feel, with whom to feel. Behind all that sparkle, all that manufactured euphoria, there's an enormous void that nobody wants to admit, because admitting it would break the illusion, would ruin the party, would mean recognizing that maybe we're not as okay as we pretend to be. Nietzsche had a name for this. He called it nihilism. This feeling that deep down nothing matters, that the great values that should give life meaning have simply disappeared, and what's left is a hole that we try to fill with anything, with parties, with drinks, with fireworks, with empty promises that next year will be better. But none of that truly fills it. None of that truly heals it. It's just a band-aid on top of a wound that keeps bleeding. The turn of the year has become this great nihilistic ritual disguised as a celebration, where everyone screams together so they don't hear the silence that comes from within, where everyone drinks together so they don't feel the emptiness that comes from within. And the more noise, more drinks, more people, more fireworks, the less space remains for that uncomfortable question that nobody wants to ask. Does any of this really matter? Do I really believe that turning the calendar is going to change anything? Am I not just pretending that everything makes sense when deep down I know it doesn't? And then you, who are alone, who didn't enter this game, You start to realize that maybe you're not missing anything, maybe you're seeing something that others don't want to see. That behind all that artificial joy there's a very real despair, a desperate attempt to believe that something will change just because the calendar changed. Nietzsche would say that when we lose the great values, when we lose the deep meaning of things, what remains for us is this frantic search for distractions, for anything that makes us forget, even if just for a few hours, that life no longer has the direction we thought it had. Being alone at the turn of the year can be, paradoxically, the most honest gesture you can make in the face of this absence of meaning. Because instead of pretending that everything's okay, instead of throwing yourself into the collective distraction, you're there, standing still, facing the void head-on, admitting that you don't know all the answers, admitting that maybe next year won't be better, admitting that maybe you're tired of pretending you believe in things you don't believe in anymore. And that's not weakness, that's not defeat, that's the beginning of something that can be much more real than any party could offer. There's a silent courage in not belonging, in not bending to social expectations just because everyone else is bending, in not doing something just because that's what's expected of you. Society doesn't know how to deal with those who say no, with those who refuse to participate in the script, with those who choose to stay out of the collective spectacle. Whoever doesn't go to the New Year's party, whoever doesn't post a photo making a toast, whoever doesn't make a list of resolutions, that someone automatically becomes a target of judgment, becomes the weird one, the bitter one, the one who doesn't know how to live. But what's powerful about this refusal? What's liberating about simply saying that you don't want to participate in what everyone else participates in? Nietzsche talked a lot about this, about the strength that exists in no, about how saying no to the world is the first step to saying yes to yourself. Because while you're busy meeting other people's expectations, while you're busy being what they expect you to be, you don't have space to discover who you really are. You don't have time to build your own values, to create your own rituals, to decide what really matters to you. Voluntary solitude at the turn of the year can be this. It can be this moment of refusal, of saying no thank you. I don't need this. I don't want this. I'm going to do things differently. And doing things differently doesn't mean being against everyone. It doesn't mean despising those who choose to go to the party. It simply means understanding that you have the right to choose your own path, that you owe no loyalty to rituals that don't make sense to you, that you don't need to justify your absence, that you don't need to explain why you prefer silence to noise. There's immense strength in that. There's profound dignity in those who have the courage not to belong, when belonging means giving up yourself. And that strength, that dignity, it only appears when you stop trying to fit in, when you stop trying to be accepted, when you finally understand that other people's approval will never give you what you really need. The word solitude carries two completely different meanings, and most people confuse the two. They think solitude is always bad, always painful, always a sign that something's wrong. But there's a gigantic difference between isolation and solitude, between being alone because you were rejected and being alone because you chose to find yourself. Isolation is when you're alone and feel empty, when you want company but don't have it, when you look at your phone hoping someone will call and nobody calls. Solitude is when you're alone and feel whole, when you don't need anyone to validate your existence, when you learn to be your own company. Spending the turn of the year alone can be isolation, or it can be solitude. It depends on how you live that moment. It depends on what you do with that silence. If you spend the whole night feeling rejected, feeling inadequate, wondering why you're not at some party like everyone else, then you're in isolation. You're letting loneliness consume you. But if you use that moment to look inward, to ask questions you never ask when you're surrounded by noise, to feel things you never feel when you're distracted, then you're in solitude. You're transforming the absence of others into the presence of yourself. Nietzsche wrote a phrase that destroys any cheap romanticization of the party. Whoever cannot bear their solitude continues hating even the happiest moments of others. And that phrase is brutal because it exposes the truth, exposes that many people go to the party not because they want to be there, but because they're afraid of being alone, because solitude hurts too much, because looking inward is too scary. And then these people stay there, in the middle of the crowd, feeling alone anyway, but at least with the illusion that they're accompanied, at least with the fantasy that they're living intensely. Learning to bear solitude, learning to transform it into something productive, into something creative, into something liberating, that's a skill most people never develop. Because it was always easier to run away. It was always easier to throw yourself into the first available distraction. But when you finally learn, when you finally manage to be alone without panicking, without feeling incomplete, you discover a type of freedom that no party, no company, no relationship can give you. You discover that you're enough, that you don't need an audience to exist, that you can be whole even when you're alone, when everyone goes out to celebrate and you stay, when the lights go out and you're there, alone with your thoughts, with your fears, with your doubts. What appears is a brutal mirror, a mirror that has no filter, that has no makeup, that has no mask. In the absence of external noise, in the absence of distractions, you're forced to listen to what's happening inside you, and often what you hear isn't pretty, isn't comfortable, isn't easy to accept. You hear the promises you made and didn't keep. You hear the lies you told yourself. You hear the fear that was always there but that you never wanted to admit. You hear all those voices that stay quiet during the day, when you're busy, when you're distracted, but that come back with full force when you finally stop, when you finally sit in silence and have nowhere left to run. The new year lived alone becomes this abyss, this moment of confrontation where you can no longer run, can no longer pretend, can no longer sweep everything under the rug. And this abyss can destroy you, can throw you into a spiral of self-criticism and despair, or it can free you, can show you truths you needed to see, can force you to make choices you'd been postponing. Nietzsche used to say that when you look into the abyss also looks into you. And that means that this encounter with the void isn't passive. It's not just you observing. It's you being observed. It's you being questioned. It's you being challenged to answer who you really are when nobody's watching, when you don't need to maintain any facade, when you can simply be. The mirror of solitude reflects things we hide from others and from ourselves, reflects the pain we never processed, the desires we never admitted, the truths we never wanted to face. And facing this alone, without anyone to comfort you, without anyone to distract you, without anyone to tell you that everything's okay, that requires a courage that most people don't have. But those who have it, who can look at that mirror without looking away, who can accept what they see there, that someone comes out different, comes out stronger, comes out more whole. Because the truth, however painful it may be, always frees more than the comfortable lie. Nietzsche created a concept that seems crazy at first glance, but that in reality is one of the deepest tests of authenticity you can do with your life. He called it eternal return. The idea is simple, but frightening. What if you had to live your life exactly as it is, with everything that happened, with all the choices you made, with all the pain you felt? What if you had to live this again, and again, and again, infinitely, eternally, without ever being able to change anything? Could you handle it? Would you accept it? Would you say yes to this life? Or would you despair just thinking about this possibility? Now, apply this to the moment you're in, alone at the turn of the year, and ask yourself, if this moment repeated forever, if you had to spend the turn of the year alone eternally, would that be unbearable, or would that be worthy of being lived infinite times? The answer tells you everything about how you're living this moment, about whether you're in resistance or acceptance, about whether you're in isolation or solitude. If the idea of repeating this eternally terrifies you, then you're running away, you're resisting, you're treating this moment as something that needs to end soon, so you can return to normal life. But if the idea doesn't scare you, if you can imagine this moment repeating and still say yes, then you're truly living, you're truly present, you're truly accepting. Eternal return isn't about believing that life really repeats. It's about using this idea as a test, as a mirror that shows whether you're living with authenticity or just surviving, waiting for the bad days to pass so you can finally start living. Nietzsche challenges you to love your life as it is, not as it could be, not as it should be, but as it really is, with all the pain, with all the solitude, with all the emptiness. And if you can do this, if you can look at the most difficult moment and say yes, that you'd live this again, then you've achieved something most people will never achieve. The freedom of not needing life to be different for you to be happy. The turn of the year carries with it two invisible weights that many people never question: the weight of the idealized past and the weight of the projected future. People cling to nostalgia, cling to those moments that seem to have been perfect, that seem to have been better than the present, and they stay there, trapped in this past that maybe was never as good as memory insists it was. And at the same time, these same people throw themselves into the future, create enormous lists of promises and goals and resolutions, as if next year is finally going to be the year when everything falls into place, when everything makes sense, when life finally truly begins. But Nietzsche warns you that both the past and the future are traps. They're illusions that prevent you from living the present, from facing what's happening now, in this exact moment. The past you idealize probably wasn't as perfect as you remember. You're just editing the memories to create a refuge, a safe place where you can hide when the present becomes too heavy. And the future you project probably won't happen the way you imagine, because you're repeating the same promises you've already made 1,000 times. You're creating the same expectations that have already frustrated you 1,000 times. The turn of the year feeds on these two illusions, convinces you that you need to look back with gratitude and look forward with hope. But what you really need is to look at now with honesty. Nietzsche proposed the destruction of idols, and that includes the idols of the past and the idols of the future, includes all these fantasies that prevent you from living what's real. Staying alone at the turn can be exactly this. It can be the refusal to continue deceiving yourself. The refusal to continue pretending that next year will be different when you know you'll repeat the same mistakes, the same choices, the same patterns. I know it's hard to hear this. I know it's more comfortable to believe that all you have to do is turn the calendar for everything to change. But the truth is that nothing changes if you don't change. And you don't change just because you decided you're going to change. You change when you finally face what needs to be faced. When you finally let go of what needs to be let go. When you finally accept that the problem isn't in the year that passed. The problem is in how you're living every year. Nietzsche divided the evolution of the human spirit into 3 stages, 3 metamorphoses that represent how we mature, how we transform, how we finally become who we really are. First comes the camel, which is the one who carries everything, who accepts all the weights that society places on top of them, who says yes to everything, who obeys, who sacrifices themselves, who never questions. Many people spend their entire lives in this stage, carrying expectations, carrying obligations, carrying values that aren't even theirs, but that were shoved into them since childhood. Then comes the lion, which is the one who learns to say no, who rebels against the weights, who fights for freedom, who destroys the chains, who refuses to carry what isn't theirs. And many people think the lion is the final stage, that all you have to do is say no, that all you have to do is destroy, that all you have to do is free yourself from others to be complete. But Nietzsche knew that no, however powerful it may be, is still a reaction, is still a response to the world, still depends on what you're rejecting to exist. The final stage is the child, who is no longer reacting, who is no longer destroying, who is creating, who is playing, who is inventing new values, new meanings, new ways of living that don't depend on approval, that don't depend on rebellion, that simply exist because yes. Spending the turn alone can be this transition from the lion to the child. It can be the moment when you stop just resisting and start creating. Stop just saying no and start saying yes, but a yes that comes from within, a yes that you built, a yes that's yours. Time alone becomes this fertile space where you can think without being interrupted, can feel without being judged, can create without needing to explain. It's in this silence that the ideas that really matter are born. It's in this emptiness that the meanings that really make a difference appear. And most people never discover this because they never stayed alone long enough to notice. Because they were always afraid of what they might find there. Because they always preferred other people's noise to their own silence. But those who dare, who allow themselves to stay there, who transform silence into a laboratory, that someone discovers that solitude isn't punishment, it's a gift, it's not the end, it's the beginning. If you're enjoying this content, you might also like our exclusive material that's in the first pinned comment. And if the problem is that empty rituals no longer serve you, then the solution isn't to force yourself to participate in them. It's not to pretend you feel what you don't feel. It's to create new rituals. It's to invent new ways of marking time that make sense to you. Nietzsche called this transvaluation, which is when you don't just reject old values, but create new values. When you don't just destroy rituals that don't work, but build rituals that do work. The traditional turn of the year is explosion. It's noise, it's collective screaming, but maybe your turn needs to be breathing, silence, presence. Instead of making a list of goals you know you won't accomplish, instead of creating expectations you know will frustrate you, how about making a sincere gesture of reconciliation with yourself? How about looking at everything that happened in the year that passed and simply accepting, without judgment, without guilt, without the need to turn everything into a lesson? How about creating a symbol just for you, a ritual just for you, that represents not the hope that the future will be better, but the acceptance that the present is what it is, and that you're willing to live this fully, without running away, without resisting, without pretending. You can light a candle and stay in silence, watching the flame, thinking about everything you carried and everything you want to let go. You can write a letter to yourself, not with promises of change, but with words of acceptance, with recognition that you did the best you could with what you had. You can simply sit in the dark and breathe, feeling the weight of your body, feeling the rhythm of your heart, feeling that you're alive, and that that's already enough. These rituals don't need an audience, don't need validation, don't need anyone besides you. Creating new values in place of old rituals isn't about being different just to be different. It's not about rejecting everything just because. It's about understanding that you have the right, and more than that, you have the responsibility to build a life that makes sense to you, not to others. And this begins with small gestures, with small refusals, with small creations. It begins with the courage to spend the turn of the year alone and transform this into something sacred, into something powerful, into something that truly belongs to you. There's an immense lightness that comes when you finally understand that you're not obligated to participate in everything, that you don't need to be in all places, that you don't need to feel all the emotions the world decides you should feel. The social pressure to always be present, always active, always connected, always happy. It's so strong that most people don't even realize they're living under this pressure. They simply think that's how life has to be. But when you take a step back, when you allow yourself to stay out of the spectacle, you realize how much weight you were carrying unnecessarily. Being alone at the turn isn't a lack. It's not the absence of something essential. It's the presence of something many people lost. The ability to simply be, without needing to prove anything, without needing to perform anything, without needing to fit into any role. You're not missing the party, you're finding yourself. You're not being left behind. You're choosing a different path. And this doesn't need to be dramatic. It doesn't need to be tragic. It can simply be peaceful. It can simply be true. Nietzsche had a concept called amor fati, which means love of fate, love of what is, deep acceptance of reality as it presents itself. It's not resignation, it's not conformism, it's something much more radical. It's the ability to look at your life, with everything it has that's difficult, that's painful, that's imperfect, and say, yes, I accept this, I embrace this, I don't need it to be different for me to be at peace. Being alone at the turn of the year and feeling amor fati, feeling that you don't need to be anywhere else, feeling that nothing's missing, that's true freedom. And I completely understand when you look at everyone posting photos from the party and feel that pang, that discomfort, that feeling that maybe you're wrong, maybe you should be there too. But that pang isn't proof that you're in the wrong place. It's just the echo of social conditioning that's still inside you, still poking you, still telling you that you need to be like everyone else. And every time you choose to stay, every time you choose silence, you're weakening that echo. You're strengthening your own voice. You're building the courage to live in the way that makes sense to you. The lightness of not needing to be part of the spectacle doesn't come overnight. It's not a magical click that changes everything. It's a practice. It's a repeated choice. It's a muscle you develop over time. And each time you choose to stay when everyone leaves, each time you choose silence when everyone screams, you're practicing this lightness. You're learning to be enough for yourself. And that's one of the most valuable gifts you can give yourself. In the end, what remains isn't the party you went to or the party you missed. What remains is the relationship you built with yourself, the peace you found within the chaos, the lucidity you conquered in the middle of collective confusion. Spending the turn of the year alone may seem like a failure in the eyes of those who don't understand. But for those who truly live this, for those who transform this into something conscious, this can be the beginning of a wisdom that no party, no celebration, no collective ritual could teach. Because lucidity isn't comfortable, lucidity isn't easy. Lucidity forces you to face truths that most people prefer to avoid. But it's from this lucidity that true comfort is born. Not the false comfort of distraction, not the illusory comfort of denial, but the deep comfort of someone who finally stopped fighting against themselves, of someone who finally accepted that it's okay to be different. It's okay to want different things. It's okay to live differently. Solitude can be cultivated as a practice, not as something that happens only when you have no choice, but as something you actively seek because you realized its value. You can create moments of solitude in the middle of your routine, moments where you turn everything off, step away from everything, and simply stay with yourself, observing, feeling, thinking. The night of the turn, lived in silence, can be a perfect space for this. You can grab a notebook and write, not with a goal, not with structure, just write whatever comes. Let the words flow. Let the thoughts organize themselves on paper. You can visualize the year that passed, not as a chronological timeline of events, but as a journey of transformation, identifying the moments of death, the moments of rebirth, the moments when something inside you truly changed. And all of this can happen alone, in the silence of your home, while everyone else is at the party. And this isn't less, it's different. And in many cases, it's much more. In the end, what remains isn't the party you went to, or the party you missed. What remains is the relationship you built with yourself, the peace you found within the chaos, the lucidity you conquered in the middle of collective confusion. Spending the turn of the year alone may seem like a failure in the eyes of those who don't understand. But for those who truly live this, for those who transform this into something conscious, this can be the beginning of a wisdom that no party, no celebration, no collective ritual could teach. Because lucidity isn't comfortable. Lucidity isn't easy. Lucidity forces you to face truths that most people prefer to avoid. But it's from this lucidity that true comfort is born. Not the false comfort of distraction, not the illusory comfort of denial, but the deep comfort of someone who finally stopped fighting against themselves. Of someone who finally accepted that it's okay to be different. It's okay to want different things. It's okay to live differently. And there's immense lightness in this acceptance. A freedom that only appears when you stop trying to participate in everything. When you understand that you don't need to be in all places. That you don't need to feel all the emotions the world decides you should feel. Being alone at the turn isn't a lack. It's not the absence of something essential. It's the presence of something many people lost. The ability to simply be, without needing to prove anything, without needing to perform anything, without needing to fit into any role. Nietzsche called this amor fati, love of fate, love of what is, deep acceptance of reality as it presents itself. It's not resignation, it's not conformism. It's something much more radical. It's the ability to look at your life, with everything it has that's difficult, that's painful, that's imperfect, and say yes. I accept this. I embrace this. I don't need it to be different for me to be at peace. And each time you choose to stay when everyone leaves, each time you choose silence when everyone screams, you're practicing this lightness. You're learning to be enough for yourself. And that's one of the most valuable gifts you can give yourself. Because in the end, you already know you're not alone. Even when you're literally alone. If this video resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and leave your like.